Hello and welcome. Assetto Corsa Competizione has just released into early access, while I've been in the process of creating this guide for Assetto Corsa, and which of course is still a relevant title. Often online I see questions on how to get into sim racing, and for example, which games should I start with? When starting with sim racing on PC, many recommend Assetto Corsa, and as I've spent quite a lot of time in Assetto Corsa, and I've created getting started guides for other titles, I thought it might be of use to some to share my experiences if it helps someone get started with Assetto Corsa on PC. I'll include timestamps below in the video description, so you can just jump to a specific section should you need to. We will later also go through the content manager for Assetto Corsa, and as an optional extra, also the crew chief. But we'll begin with a default installation of Assetto Corsa, and which I suggest new users should do. To get started with Assetto Corsa on PC, you'll need to purchase a copy of the game through Steam. You could, for example, just purchase a copy of the base game, and then download some free car and track mods, as there are plenty of content options to choose from. There is a season pass option here as well, but note that it only applies to the 3 Porsche packs. And in this case, the 3 Porsche packs are just under €15. So purchasing the Porsche packs via the season pass would allow for a saving in this case. Note that there's also an Ultimate Edition, which includes the base game and all the DLC. However, I understand that if you purchase the base game and then some DLC items, and later consider purchasing the Ultimate Edition, when for example it goes on sale, that you won't be refunded for the content that you already own. So if you're interested in the Ultimate Edition, when it for example goes on sale, then purchase that version and that version only. To start Assetto Corsa on Steam, locate the game in your Steam library and click play. An intro trailer will play, which if you wish you can skip by clicking on the screen. And then from the start screen we'll select the main menu option. The main menu includes 4 sections: Drive, Career, Replays and Options. We'll first examine the Options section, beginning with Video. The Video section includes 4 tabs: Display, Effects, View and Reflections. In the Display tab, the resolution and rendering options control how the game appears once you've started to drive. The launcher here remains in the background and is separate from the actual game itself. We can quickly show this if we select a lower resolution and disable the full screen mode. We can switch the launcher in and out of full screen using the F11 function key. I'm running a single 1080p 60Hz display. Note that Assetto Corsa now also supports virtual reality, but we won't be covering VR here. And I usually run the game in full screen when driving. You can try enabling vertical sync if you experience any screen tearing while driving. And you can also apply a frame rate limit if you find that helps. Overall, there's no hard and fast rule on what to apply in terms of the graphics settings. If you, for example, want to run a single player race on the Nürburgring Nordschleife, using the maximum number of opponents and selecting evening time with visual effects enabled, you may notice a performance hit in terms of the on-screen frame rate. It will of course depend on how powerful your PC happens to be. To establish a baseline, we could begin with medium to high settings and then increase them later. Later we'll show how to use the in-game frame rate counter so you can keep an eye on your performance as you make changes to the graphics settings. Before we move on to the effects tab, note the text at the top of the display tab advising you to check that your video card settings allow Assetto Corsa to control anti-aliasing and anisotropic filtering. In most cases you can ignore this since the default settings should be correct. However, for those who may not be aware of how to do this, we can quickly check it. For example, for those with an NVIDIA graphics card, right-click anywhere on your desktop and select NVIDIA Control Panel. And in Adjust Image Settings with Preview, select Use the Advanced 3D Image Settings, and then click Take Me There. Select the Program Settings tab and click Add. If you've already been playing Assetto Corsa, under Recently Used, you may find acs.exe and then select it and click Add Selected Program. If you don't find it there, browse to where you have Assetto Corsa installed and choose acs.exe from there. On the left, you can see a File Explorer window showing an example Assetto Corsa installation directory where acs.exe is located. Once you've added the program, you can check its settings, and in this case all seems to be as it should. If not, select the Restore option on the upper right to restore the settings to their defaults, and once you're done, click Apply. Note that acs.exe refers to the 64-bit version of Assetto Corsa, which we're running here. You may notice as well the 32-bit x86 version of Assetto Corsa inside the same directory, which you can choose to run instead from the General Settings section. The Effects tab includes some more visual effects controls. Again, smoke you could set to medium or high to begin with, and the same with post-processing effects, or just disable them completely. You can choose an effect preset here, or later in-game when you're driving. We'll look at this later. Again, the settings you choose will depend on personal preference and the power of your PC. In the View tab, you can set your in-game field of view, or also later when driving. I'm currently using a value of 40 degrees. You can use your keyboard arrows to select a value from the slider. You can use the G-force effects and camera shake at high speed controls to reduce the motion when driving over uneven surfaces. In this example, the camera bounces around a lot, and which may cause issues for some. Note, there's a real head motion plugin available for Assetto Corsa that I've heard improves the motion effects. We'll later include some information on the Real Head Motion plugin when we go through setting up the content manager for Assetto Corsa. And I usually choose to hide driver arms and leave the wheel rotation limit off, as I haven't found it necessary to use this feature yet. The Reflections tab includes some more graphical effects options. Again, you may wish to start with medium to high settings to see how the game performs in terms of frame rate. The audio settings options are pretty standard, and there's no audio output selection such as speakers or headphones, which other titles include. I've heard it said that in order to improve your driving, you should turn down the engine volume and turn up the tire sounds. It's something I need to try myself. For the controls, we'll go through the setup of a Thrustmaster T300, as it would be for a fresh install of Assetto Corsa. You can play Assetto Corsa with a wheel or a gamepad. Currently the keyboard options are selected, so we'll select instead wheel/custom. Before creating this tutorial, I set up a fresh install of Assetto Corsa, and as far as I can see, there's still no ready profile for a Thrustmaster T300, which seems odd. As you can see from the lower left of the screen, the input devices are correctly detected, and there's a way to check which button corresponds to which number, but there's no way to assign these to a controller profile. We then start the configuration wizard. Don't worry if your wheel rotation value appears to have been detected incorrectly. You can just modify the profile later. Once you're done, you may notice that the pedals are set as inverted, which is normal for a Thrustmaster T3PA pedal set. Keep this in mind should you ever experience any pedal input issues. And as said, you can manually set the degrees of rotation for the wheel using your up and down arrow keys. The use a separate shifter option is also selected following the configuration, so the H pattern shifter will be ready to use for those cars that are set to use it. And before we continue with applying further settings, we can enter a name for this new profile and click Save. Note that to make any changes to a controller profile, you must first select it and click Load, and then remember to save it once you're done. And then, making sure that the profile we have just created is loaded, we can continue with the profile setup. Which controls you choose to assign to whatever number of buttons are available on your wheel is up to personal preference. If you drive cars that support traction control, ABS, brake balance, KERS or DRS, then perhaps map those to your wheel, and use your keyboard for those controls you don't have buttons for or won't be using too often. The Thrustmaster rim I have includes a 4-way directional pad, as the set is intended for use on a PlayStation as well. But for some reason Assetto Corsa won't accept inputs other than when navigating the pit menu, which can also be done using the arrow keys on a keyboard. In the Advanced tab, there's a Combine with Keyboard option. I'm not sure if this is required to use wheel and keyboard controls together, but I guess this should be selected as well. And again, remember to save any changes you make before moving on. I'm going to replace my current wheel profile from a backup to show my force feedback settings. While your Assetto Corsa installation folder contains copies of the controller profiles available in-game, it isn't where the profiles that players create are stored. The controller profiles you create are stored in your Documents folder. Incidentally, I once had this folder corrupted when the PC switched off following an electricity supply outage, while either Assetto Corsa was running or the folder just happened to be open. I then had to create some profiles again, so perhaps keep a backup of this folder somewhere. Also, Assetto Corsa sometimes appears to have issues if you set up your control scheme and then later connect the devices to different USB ports. Just something to be aware of. On screen now are my current Thrustmaster Windows controller settings. The defaults basically, along with my Assetto Corsa force feedback settings for the T300 base. Note that if you have a Thrustmaster T3PA pedal set and are using the conical brake mod, you might need to recalibrate the brake pedal when restarting your PC so that the full extent of the pedal travel is detected correctly. We can quickly examine the general settings. As we referred to earlier, the Force 32-bit option of ACS.exe is here, should you need to use it. There's an option to skip the intro video, which is useful, and you can check the settings for the auto-saving of replays. And below is where any application mods will appear, which we'll take a look at later. We won't spend too much time on the drive or career sections, as most of it is fairly obvious. We can look at setting up a quick single-player race, which is useful for comparison with the content manager, which we'll take a look at later. So let's look at the race, quick race option. To select a car, we can select all cars or filter by brand or tag. We'll select the GT3 tag and choose the AMG Mercedes. Clicking the spanner icon allows us to check the details of this car. Click the color wheel to change the livery, and then select the background type for the 360-degree view. Once in 360 degrees view, we can use the keyboard arrows to move the car around. Use the in and out option to enter the car. We can then choose another background, and then once in the 360-degree view again, change the rotation speed and change the post-process filter. You'll remember we looked at the effects presets in the effects tab in video settings. And then we can select a track. Again, a similar filtering method applies: all, country or tag. We'll choose Monza in Italy, and then look at the race opponent setup options. You can set up a race where the opponents are in the same car as you, or choose a random selection from a brand or tag of your choice. Or set up a custom selection. And in all cases, add or remove opponents as you wish. Note on the right below the start button that the GT3 tag has been pre-selected based on the tag assigned to the car we chose to drive. If we select an old Group C prototype, the tag Proto C will be pre-selected, and any other cars in that same class will appear there as well. And removing the tag will of course remove the cars currently appearing there. The summary selection is where you will specify the session parameters. And the level of difficulty, or in this case realism. The starting position slider should reflect the number of opponents you've selected, so dragging it all the way to the right should place you in the back of the grid. The realism settings you choose will depend on your existing experience with the game. Choose a ready preset tab or customize it. Then check your opponent selection again and set up their strength. These values you can play around with as you get used to the game. And in most cases, the levels you select here will depend on the class of car you choose and how fast they are. And then when you're ready, click Start to begin the session. To take a look at the in-game app options, we'll quickly choose the Practice option, where the use of opponents is disabled, and click Start. We'll begin with a quick look at the session setup options for this car. We'll change the tyre compound to soft, for example if we wanted to test doing some hot laps. We can also increase or decrease the amount of fuel in use. As we can see, this car supports traction control and ABS, which we assigned controls for earlier. And if we wish to try making a pit stop, we can configure a profile for this as well. We can then return to the first screen to assign a name to this profile and save it for possible use again. As we've started in the pits, the pit menu appears on the right. So let's move out onto the track to clear the screen and take a look at some of the apps included with Assetto Corsa. The list of apps appears on the right. The default Essentials app we can move, reduce in size, or just turn it off. The Tires app is useful. And we also have an app to modify the audio setup in-game. What we'll do is choose another virtual desktop and place the audio app there, along with the Help app. The Help app shows the keyboard function keys to use for the camera options. Note that when in the F5 key roll camera mode, you can use the mouse and mouse wheel to move the camera around. And then we can add the post-process filter selector to another screen, in this case number 3, along with the onboard settings to set up the driving view for this car. There's also a force feedback controller. However, there's an alternative mod app which we'll install later. The Render Stats app includes a frame rate counter, which we can include in slot number 1, so we can keep an eye on the frame rate while we're driving. And we can place the Pedals app beside the Tires app. And the Gears app, which we can make a little smaller to fit better at this resolution. The track map you can also use for any tracks you're not familiar with. And the Electronics app is also useful for keeping an eye on traction control, ABS or DRS for those cars that support it. Here's a quick example of using the traction control and ABS controls we set up to manage those features in a car. And when active, you'll see them light up yellow. And the ERS, or Energy Recovery System Management app, is also useful if you regularly drive Formula 1 or LMP1 cars that include hybrid technology. And the Race Position app we could also use, and like the Gears app, make it a bit smaller first. And similar to the track map, you can use the Track Description app to read the names of the track sections as you pass through them. And once we're done, as we flip through the virtual desktops, we can see the apps are ready to use. Some of the cars that became available later for Assetto Corsa via DLC packs include hybrid technology. The Ferrari SF70H is quite complicated. I'll include a link below in the video description, where Stefano from Kunos explains the implementation.
So first we need to understand how this car works. This is literally more like a spaceship than a race car.
As a quick example, to demonstrate part of what we've already learned in terms of configuring controls and the virtual desktop apps, we can take a look at the Ferrari SF70H in action. We'll first assign some of the buttons on our wheel to the hybrid controls, and then take the car out on track at Spa. Notice how the electronics app, which displayed ABS and traction controls for the AMG GT3, now displays DRS for this F1 Ferrari, and how the Gears app now also displays the usage of battery energy. Blue is charging, yellow is allowed usage for the current lap, and the green bar the current battery level. And one of the cars included in the Porsche packs, the 919 Hybrid 2016, also includes hybrid technology, but not DRS or ABS, only traction control it seems. The pit controls we saw earlier can be brought up using the arrow keys on your keyboard, and we can test creating a quick pit profile in slot number 1, and then enter the pits to see how a pit stop functions in Assetto Corsa. Note that pit speed entry is controlled automatically, so there's no pit speed limiter option. I'll also include below in the video description a link to some keyboard shortcuts that can be used to control some features in game. We'll take a look at the replays section. The replays listed here will be comprised of those you have selected to save at the end of a session and those that have been auto-saved, as per the replay auto-saving settings applied in the general settings screen. If you wish to keep a copy of an auto-saved replay, then select it and click Save Selected, which will move it into the main replay screen. For example, at the end of a completed race, if you want to save the replay, click the X on the lower right, then click Continue, and on the upper right click Save Replay. Note that here, if auto-saving for replays is enabled, there will be replays of any previous sessions. Replays of less than 10 megabytes in size are the false starts while I was checking settings, or restarts. You can select those and then click Delete. And then holding the Control key, you can select multiple items you wish to keep, and then click Save Selected. The replay saving options are in the general settings screen. You can disable auto-saving completely if you wish, and then for either auto or manual saving of replays, set the recording quality. I set the maximum replay file size to 200 megabytes, since 500 or the maximum gave a potential memory usage error. You can then set the maximum size for replays of the various session types to save. To access a replay, select one from the list and click Load. In replay mode, the same virtual desktop apps appear as do when driving, so we can select slot number 2 where we placed the Help app and refer to the keyboard shortcuts listed there. Using Ctrl+H, we can hide the apps if we want to just run the replay. And using the replay controls below, click through the camera types and move the focus to a specific car from the race. And then using Ctrl H to bring the apps back, we can refer to the Visuals keyboard shortcuts included in the Help app. And remember that when pressing F5 to access the roll camera, we can use the mouse and mouse wheel to move around. The following is an optional extra for replays, should some wish to try it, and later we'll show another and more easier way to set this up. Go to your Assetto Corsa installation and open the System folder, and in there the CFG folder. We can make some quick edits to the Assetto_Corsa.ini file to allow more camera controls inside replays. The easiest thing to do would be to just copy and paste the file to create a backup, and then right click on the original Assetto_Corsa.ini file and select Open with Notepad. Look for the following values shown on screen and edit the value of 0 to 1 and then save the file. Then open Assetto Corsa and select the replay and click Load. Then once the replay is open, press the F7 function key to enable the free camera mode and use the mouse and arrow keys to move freely around the replay. And you can also use the Photo Mode app to set up the view. While we're on the topic of apps, to get started with installing mods, we'll first take a look at some mod apps. We'll download 3 apps from racedepartment.com. To download these apps, you'll need to create a Race Department account, and which is a good idea since you'll receive alerts on your account if any of the mods you've downloaded later receive any updates. And since a basic racedepartment.com account is free, you could consider supporting them by subscribing to their YouTube channel as well, a link to which I'll include below in the video description. The 3 apps we'll download and install are FFB Clip, a keyboard shortcuts extension, and a fuel usage monitoring app. Again, I'll include links to all 3 below in the video description. To install these mods, just unpack the files and then copy the contents of each folder into the root of your Assetto Corsa installation directory. This may sound obvious, but in Windows, when copying files into a directory which already includes folders, make sure you drag the folders far enough to the right so that they're not placed into a subfolder by mistake. Then start Assetto Corsa. We can use the F11 function key to exit full screen so we can see how the mods that we have copied into the apps folder in Assetto Corsa now appear in the general settings section, and we must scroll down and tick the boxes to enable them. Firstly, since we've already added several apps, the screen is perhaps looking a little busy, so we'll disable the default Essentials app and move some other things around before we add the mod apps we've just installed. Any app mods will appear at the end of the app list, so we scroll down to the end and look first for FFB Clip. You can look up the info on this app in the download page, but basically in my case, I run with dynamic on, reduce the FFB strength and threshold, and enable the graph display. You may also wish to increase the refresh rate to increase the speed at which the graph is drawn. And for the fuel usage app, right now I'm using the first element. If you want to have things placed neatly, but they won't fit side by side, use the resizing arrows for those apps that include them to get things to fit. As you can see when driving, the FFB Clip app can display a graph of your force feedback level, and if the green graph goes above the horizontal red line, then the force feedback is clipping, which basically means that there are force feedback forces that your wheel cannot interpret correctly, and running your wheel for an extended period when force feedback clipping is occurring may damage your wheel mechanism. In Assetto Corsa, fuel usage data is available after you've done 2 laps of a circuit. The app shows, going from left to right, the current amount of fuel, the number of laps you have remaining with the current amount of fuel, and below that the fuel usage per lap. And on the right, a selector for the number of laps you would like to continue with, and below that the amount of fuel you would need. So for example, when entering the pits, you can use your keyboard arrows to navigate the pit controls and select the amount of fuel you wish to take on board. The keyboard shortcuts extension we installed is interesting, but of course it would mean more keyboard shortcuts to remember. We'll discuss this more when we cover the content manager for Assetto Corsa. And finally, another Assetto Corsa app mod, which is interesting, the setup market from thesetupmarket.com. You'll need to create an account if you want to upload some setups of your own. To try out a few setups, you just download the app from racedepartment.com. Extract and install it by copying the app folders into the root of your Assetto Corsa installation. Again, be careful not to place the folders into a subfolder by mistake. And then again, we run the Assetto Corsa launcher, and from the general settings enable this new app. Again, we're using the F11 key to exit full screen, so you can see how the apps we've added correspond to the apps available in-game. As a quick example, we'll select the Ferrari 488 GT3 on the Nordschleife and see what possible setups are available. Once we're in-game, we'll for example select the 4th virtual desktop and again scroll to the base of the apps list on the right and look for the setup market. In this app you can choose between current, any or other tracks. We'll select current track and note the pagination option on the lower right hand corner. We'll select one from page 2 and click to download it, and then click the escape key to return to the pits. Notice that although the current track is selected, for some reason right now the downloaded setup doesn't show. If we just select another track and then click back to the current track, the setup should then appear, and we can select it and click load. A couple more mod apps worth mentioning are Helicorsa, the Sidekick and Pro Tires apps. I'll include links to all of these below in the video description. We'll now look at downloading a mod car and track. We'll begin by visiting racedepartment.com again. Of course, there are more sources for Assetto Corsa mods than Race Department, but this is one of the best examples. Then select the download section and select the Assetto Corsa category. As you can see, there's a separate category for the mod apps we just looked at. Then select Assetto Corsa cars, and we'll quickly sort the list by rating and look for something that may not already be in Assetto Corsa, such as this Seat Leon TCR. Then we download this mod, and browsing back, select the Assetto Corsa Tracks category, and again sorting by rating, choose Watkins Glen. We then extract the downloaded files. Actually, it might be an idea to keep the mod files you download in a folder so you can keep track of what you've installed and the version number. Or perhaps just keep a record of the downloaded folder name, which may contain a version number. And since Race Department will provide alerts for mod updates, you can check any updates against the records of what you've already installed. In this example, the Seat Leon includes folders for the car and fonts in a content folder. So we'll copy both directly into the content folder in our Assetto Corsa installation directory. Note how the folder for the track contains a folder inside it where the track contents are actually located. So you would copy this folder into the track subfolder in your Assetto Corsa content directory, and then perhaps retain a copy of the parent folder, which we can see lists the version number for this track mod. And then when we run the Assetto Corsa launcher again, we can see the new car inside the car selector, and then we click on the track selector to select the track which we know is in the USA. However, I'm noticing that there are two tags for the USA, and both of which contain content from Kunos, so it doesn't appear to be an issue with the mod. And then if I check the tag selector, there's just one instance of the USA, where indeed I'll find the track, so something is going on there, but nevertheless I'm still able to find Watkins Glen. We'll take a look at native Assetto Corsa multiplayer later, but first we'll take a look at installing the sim racing system for Assetto Corsa. Begin by visiting simracingsystem.com, links as always below in the video description. You'll need to register first and have an admin approve your account setup before you can download the application for Assetto Corsa. Note that to register correctly, you'll need to use your real name. And once you've registered and your account has been activated, under the SRS menu on the website, select Instructions and select the Assetto Corsa app link. Download the archive and extract and install it, the same way we did for app, car and track mods earlier. And note that you will be copying the contents of the Sim Racing System Assetto Corsa apps folder into the root of your Assetto Corsa installation directory. And as before, you'll need to enable the application from the General Settings section inside the Assetto Corsa launcher. Note how Sim Racing System becomes a new menu item on the left below Drive. And to access Sim Racing System from within Assetto Corsa, you'll need to enter your Sim Racing System login credentials. There may be several race events to choose from. If you check the footer of the simracingsystem.com homepage, you'll see the names of several sim racing focused YouTube channels that host race events using Sim Racing System. To access the native Assetto Corsa multiplayer from the Drive menu, select Online, and if it's your first time, you'll need to agree to the multiplayer terms and conditions. Note the multiplayer filter options at the top of the list. Clicking the question mark icon opens the help info, which outlines the functions of the icons on the right. To download the content manager for Assetto Corsa, visit assettocorsa.club and click Content Manager. I'll include a direct link below in the video description. And then scroll down and click Download Lite version and extract the files. The brief instructions included state that you can copy the Content Manager application pretty much anywhere on your PC. Only don't place it in some read-only directory, as that may prevent application updates applying correctly. I have Assetto Corsa installed on a second hard disk inside the PC, used for storing data and games. So I just placed the Content Manager application in the Assetto Corsa installation folder there, in the apps folder beside the Python folder, where the Assetto Corsa applications are stored. Once you have it copied to the correct location, you could right-click on the application and select Send to Desktop to create a shortcut. This is useful if you plan to play Assetto Corsa by going directly through the Content Manager. And note that you should start Steam before you start the Content Manager, so it's easier to launch Assetto Corsa from Steam once you're ready to start driving. However, there does appear to be a setting in Content Manager which allows it to start Steam for you. The light version of the Content Manager for Assetto Corsa is functional. However, to access features like tracks in the content section, you'll need to donate some money, which you can quickly do via PayPal, for example. From the settings menu, select Content Manager, and at the top of the list, select General. And on the right, click the button beside the App Key option. Note I already own an app key, so in my case the button reads Change. And if you want to purchase a key, click Get a New Key, which will take you back to the assettocorsa.club website, where you can select your payment method. Remember to include your email address when donating, so you can receive your application key. In Content Manager, single and multiplayer racing are located under a single category called Drive. And under Drive and Single, both the native Assetto Corsa Drive and Career sections are located. Under Drive Live, Sim Racing System will be included if you happen to have it installed. And you can also access RSR should you happen to use that as well. And online, Kunos displays the multiplayer servers available through the native Assetto Corsa multiplayer server browser. We'll look at setting up a quick race like we did earlier, except this time via the Content Manager. So from under Drive we select Single and then Quick. And on the car thumbnail, click the garage icon to change the car. You can sort by brand, country and tag, just like a native Assetto Corsa, and also category. The Content Manager can separate content made for Assetto Corsa by the developers Kunos or third-party mods, which is also useful. And you can also sort by DLC content, if you happen to have some, of course. We'll use the DLC category to select one of the Porsche Pack cars. And the same category types apply when selecting a track. So again, you can sort by tag, mod or DLC, etc. Again, we'll pick a track from one of the DLC packs, if only because I don't recall which tracks those included. We select Brands Hatch in the UK, and note how if 2 or more layouts are available, you can select them from the lower left of the track thumbnail. Note, on the lower left of the screen, you need to click the ellipsis if you want to select the difficulty or realism parameters for the session. And if you create a custom option, you can also save it as a preset, and perhaps make a note of where these presets are stored, since if you ever need to reinstall Windows, you may wish to back these folders up. And you can also select a custom controller profile if you happen to have one for use with the current car selection. From the session event types, we'll choose Race. And notice how the opponent strength and aggression sliders include square brackets around the sliders, so you can set a variant value around the strength you choose. And clicking on the ellipsis here will also show some more options. The grid type option is nice. In this example, we'll go with same brand and class. Having the number of opponents and position sliders together is also a nice idea. Note that you can also save this session setup as a preset as well. You can then choose some of the other elements like weather and track conditions, and when you're ready, click Go. When I clicked Go, in this case I received some kind of error. However, it didn't seem to affect the start of the race. Once the race has begun, as a test of sorts, we'll visit the fourth virtual desktop and use the Setup Market app to download and save a setup for this car. And when we return to the Content Manager, if we select the Manage Setup option over the car thumbnail, we can look at the way Content Manager displays the car setup info. We've already looked at installing the Setup Market app for use inside Assetto Corsa, and the Content Manager integrates the Setup Market directly into its own car setup menu, should you wish to try it there. Go to Settings, Content Manager, and then Integrate it, and enable the Setup Market tab. And then when checking a setup before starting a session, you can check the Setup Market for available setups based on the currently selected car. Let's look at a popular car such as the Mazda MX-5, for which several options are available. And to try a setup, click Install. We'll now quickly look at the data types available inside the Content Manager for Assetto Corsa. Lap times. The Sources app appears to include the Sidekick app mod we referred to earlier. Results. From the main results page, you can click Try Again to run that particular session type again, which is useful. Stats contains some useful info, and it can separate information based on content made by Kunos or third-party mods. Under Media, you can access your saved screenshots and replays. The content section has several options. You can browse your installed car list. The Find Information link will search the web for info on that car. Go to Settings, Content Manager, Content to change the search engine to Google, for example. Update previews, I guess, is updating the previews here based on the liveries included with the car. With Content Manager, you can display the car in the native Assetto Corsa showroom or use Content Manager's own showroom, which is feature packed. You can add multiple cars. Freely rotate your view with your mouse and take photos, etc. You can analyze content to check for possible errors. And you can also browse the tracks you have installed. Under Miscellaneous, you can see the apps you've installed, as well as examine the setup profiles for your post-processing filters. Content Mods is interesting, although it's not fully complete as I'm recording this video. I've been able to install a mod car using this method. Anything else was with mixed results. I can show an example of installing a car mod which did appear to work. First, go to Settings, Content Manager, Generic Mods. There will be a mods directory listed there for a mods folder inside your Assetto Corsa installation. If the mods folder doesn't exist, you'll need to create one. We'll copy the archive for another car we've downloaded into the mods folder and extract it. Note that once extracted, the folder structure of this mod is in the format of mod name, content, and then cars and fonts. We then return to the content manager and double click the mod name on the left to enable it. And when we check the cars directory inside our Assetto Corsa installation, it should be there, as well as appearing in the car list inside the content manager. The tools section contains some data analysis and repair tools. I haven't really used this much yet, and it wouldn't be advisable to apply any changes to any first-party content in Assetto Corsa created by Kunos. The mod shop allows you to dynamically install mods. Before adding an online mod source, we'll quickly visit the settings page, and under the content manager section, select the content section and switch the temporary files location from the default temp directory in Windows to the folder we've been using to store our mod downloads. This way we can keep a track of the mods we've installed. And also, if you haven't already, make sure the available list of plugins for the content manager is installed before trying the mod shop, since I assume the 7-zip application is needed to extract downloaded mod files correctly. We then return to the mod shop and click to add a source. There are a few pre-selected options, but as one I tried was just linking to racedepartment.com, I thought I would try downloading directly from Race Department instead. So what I'll do is just copy the URL of the Assetto Corsa section of the Race Department downloads page and paste it in and click OK. I'll then browse to find a car, track or app mod. As I mentioned earlier, you'll need a Race Department account to be able to download mods, and if you haven't created an account and signed in, the content manager will remind you once you click install on the upper right. Enter your racedepartment.com account details and tick the box to stay logged in. The download will start, and once completed you can click install. This is useful since you don't need to manage extracting files, etc. And once the process completes, if you select show file, it will show you where the download has been placed. We can then check the car section of the content area to see that the mods have been added correctly. It occurred to me while using the Content Manager mod shop to install mods that since we've already added racedepartment.com as a source, it should be possible to use any links from that site. Many videos on the best mods for Assetto Corsa include links to Race Department in the video descriptions. As an example, we'll check one of the videos by Chris Hay and open a link in a new browser tab to get the proper source URL. Then copy the link and open racedepartment.com in the mod shop and paste in the link and install the mod from there. And once you're done, you can click the home icon to return to the main page of the racedepartment.com source we added. As I mentioned earlier, if you've signed in to racedepartment.com to download a mod, you'll receive an alert if there's an update, and you could use the mod shop to install the update, since it should, I assume, update any existing data. The settings section in the Content Manager we've already touched on a little. It's divided into Content Manager's own settings along with Assetto Corsa and app settings. I'll go quickly through these, leaving out anything we've already covered. First, Content Manager's own settings. Appearance. In the Appearance section, there's a server link option, which I guess is for connecting to dedicated servers via the dedicated server app included with Assetto Corsa. I'll include a link to some info on the topic below in the video description. In the Drive section, there's an option to add integration for the Real Head Motion plugin. I've heard people recommend the use of real head motion, so I'll quickly show how to install it. I believe it may cause conflicts with head tracking systems like TrackIR, which I sometimes use, so I don't personally use real head motion right now, but it might be worth a try. Clicking on the red question mark will take you to a web page with the relevant info. Scroll down to the base of the post to download the latest version of Real Head Motion. Once you've extracted the folder, you can copy it, for example, to the apps directory inside your Assetto Corsa installation, the same place we put the content manager. Then run the application and click Register DLLs. Refer to the download page for more info. I'll include the link below in the video description. Then return to the content manager, and in the drive settings, check that the Real Head Motion app settings are pointing to the correct location where we just copied the application folder. And do the same in the integrated section as well. Where you can also enable or disable multiplayer services like RSR or the sim racing system. The quick switches section is interesting. No matter where you are in the content manager, if you right click, it pops out, and using this screen, you can add shortcuts there. For example, you can quickly select to hide the driver's arms and wheel and display the virtual mirror before you start a race session. Or quickly enable the free camera mode, which you enable using the F7 function key, or select a custom controller profile. The sharing section appears to have options for backing up content and replays to cloud storage services like Google Drive and Dropbox. Assetto Corsa settings. In the Apps settings section, you can specify which apps appear in which virtual desktop, define which appear first, and save the layout combinations as presets. The native Assetto Corsa video settings are also here, and you can also create presets. This would be useful if you want to create a profile where you turn down the graphic settings. For example, if you ran a race session with an increased amount of AI opponents, or if you go between single or triple screen or VR hardware setups. In the View and UI settings, you can change the G-force and camera shake options available in the View tab in the video settings in Assetto Corsa we looked at earlier. And like with video settings, you can also create audio presets if you happen to run multiple audio setups. In the control settings, your Assetto Corsa controller profiles are also available. It adds integration for the keyboard shortcuts extension that we looked at earlier. And to have this app available inside the content manager, you will need to download and install it inside Assetto Corsa like we did earlier. Some of the buttons on my Thrustmaster T300 wheel, which is compatible with PlayStation, appear with square, triangle, circle and X button, which I don't recall seeing before on PC, and which is of no real use as such. In the System tab, you can assign controls for controlling replays, which the native Assetto Corsa control setup doesn't support, and I'm able to use the directional pad on the wheel for more than just navigating the pit menu, it seems. So in this System tab, I can use it to add controls for replays, or use it to control the keyboard shortcuts extension, so I can use the D-pad to start, pause or exit a race session, or teleport to the pits. One interesting feature is the ability to create an online sharing link for your controller settings, and which is a nice idea. In Assetto Corsa Miscellaneous, you can create 5 pit stop profile slots. I don't recall being able to do that natively in Assetto Corsa. And you can also change the pit menu to a mouse-driven interface. It seems you need to be in the pit box before you can view this though, so it doesn't appear if you use the arrow keys when approaching the pits. In the system section, you can also enable dev apps and the free camera mode using the F7 key, like you can using the quick switches, and you can increase the field of view and the rendering distance of the virtual mirror. In chase camera, you can play around with the position of the chase camera should you happen to be using that view. Damage Displayer allows you to tweak where and for how long the damage indicator appears. And finally, Presets per mode allows you to apply the various app, audio, video or control presets you may create to the various driving condition types. To install the Crew Chief app, visit thecrewchief.org and click Download Crew Chief for PC. If Windows Defender happens to detect the installer as a virus, it's being detected as a false positive. So just open the Security Center and look for the installer and click Allow. If you see the Windows Defender Smart Screen, click More Info and then click Run Anyway. When installing the Crew Chief, you should be prompted to download and install a missing dependency, which will be the Microsoft Speech Platform Runtime. So just click OK, and then once the page has opened, click Download, where you'll need to select the required version, which in most cases should be x64 for 64-bit. If you don't receive the prompt, I'll include the download link below in the video description, since you'll need to install this anyway. The Crew Chief will then proceed to download any required sound packs and driver names, etc., and will need to restart itself several times. You will then also need to download and install a language pack to support the Microsoft Speech Platform Runtime, and which the Crew Chief should also prompt you to do. If you are not prompted to download a language pack, again I'll include a link below in the video description. The link I'm including is for the US English language pack, and if you wish to choose another version, then cancel the download and click the Click Here to download manually link and select your relevant language version. Once you have the Crew Chief installed, along with a required Speech Platform Runtime and language pack, you can begin to use it. If your controllers don't appear, in the available controllers on the lower left, click Scan for Controllers. And then from the upper right, select the My Name value as the name you would like the Crew Chief to use. The Chief voice below the My Name value will be the voice of the Crew Chief, who will speak, for example, when a race is starting or when you need to pit. The spotter voice you can leave the same as the Crew Chief above it or choose an alternative. You can then select a game value, in this case Assetto Corsa 64-bit, and then over on the left click Start Application. If you want to change the crew chief and spotter volume or the background noise level, then adjust the sliders. Click Stop over on the left and click Start again to listen to a preview of your updated audio settings. If you want to try it, you can extend the functionality of the crew chief by using voice commands based on a predefined list. What you can do, for example, is assign a button which you will hold when you want to speak to the crew chief. Start the crew chief application and select the controller you wish to use, in this example my wheel. Under Available Actions we select Talk to Crew Chief, and then over on the right under Voice Recognition Mode choose Hold Button and click Assign and choose the button you will hold when you wish to speak to the crew chief. Then start the application and try some voice commands.
Radio check.
Spotter, radio check.
Keep quiet will stop the crew chief from talking, and keep me posted will turn it back on again.
Keep quiet.
Okay, I'll leave you to it.
Keep me posted.
Okay, we'll keep you posted.
Click Help and Getting Started and scroll down, and under the voice recognition section you'll see the list of available predefined commands. And then while driving you can ask, for example, how's my fuel?
5 laps. Let's make them count. Okay mate, get ready.
How's my fuel?
30 litres remaining. Green, green, green.
Note that in Assetto Corsa you'll normally need to complete at least 2 or more laps for this to function correctly.